When I bought my first electric guitar, I kind of immediately wanted to record myself. One reason was to see if it sounded as good recorded as it did in my head when I was playing. Of course it didn't, because it never does. That's kind of a different story though. I bought an audio interface, and with it I got some kind of starter edition of Cubase. I spent the better part of a week trying to get that setup to work, and it never did. Not stably anyway. Every time I finally managed to record something, the next time I would start Cubase, it didn't work anymore. The track wouldn't record anything, plugins I'd placed on it stopped working or went missing completely. I went on forums for help, and somebody suggested I try Reaper. With Reaper, I was up and running in 10 minutes, and with a stable setup that would work every time I launched the application. If you're just getting started recording yourself playing guitar, I hope this video can be kind of a head start. I'm not saying that Cubase is impossible to get working, but I'm saying that with Reaper, it's so much easier. First of all, apart from your guitar, you need one of these. This is an audio interface. It's an external sound card that connects to your computer. One question, could you use the internal sound card of your computer? Theoretically, maybe. Practically, absolutely not. Why? Well, some of the clues to why not are in the controls of this interface. Over here are the inputs of the interface. This one has two, this one and this one. They're both of a combination type that allows you to plug teleplugs, like from an instrument, and XLR type connectors that usually connect microphones. An audio interface has something called preamps. The input levels from an electric guitar or a microphone are too weak on their own, and they need to be amplified. So this is the work of the preamps. There are a number of controls for each of the inputs. Maybe the most important one is this, the gain knob. This is basically the input volume knob. If you turn this up too high, the sound will start clipping. And the Focusrite is good because it has an indicator. You can see it as I'm speaking into it right now. There's a green LED indicating that there's no clipping. If there would be clipping, if the input volume would be set too high, this one would turn red. Below it, there's a selector between line and instrument. This controls if the preamp is going to amplify a lot or less. Line is selected when you have some kind of other equipment that you plug into it. Instrument is selected when you plug in an instrument, like an electric guitar. This next knob controls if the output from the audio interface is going to be direct, that is, just mirroring what comes in through the inputs, or if it's going to be run through the processing in the computer and then play back what the computer is sending back to it as output. Why would we need this? Well, one thing that's really important when you're recording instruments or singing is latency. So latency is the time it takes for the input signal to come into the audio interface, go into the computer, get processed, and then be sent back out. Any kind of latency over 10 milliseconds is going to be a problem, because then everything you hear that comes out of the interface is going to sound like it's lagging. So playing is going to be sluggish, you're going to get out of tempo, it's going to be really hard to play and listen to the monitored sound. So what you could do is turn this knob all the way to the left and just hear the direct input. Then you'd have almost no lag at all. The problem with that is that you wouldn't get any kind of plugins or effects. So if you're trying to run amp sims, you would get the dry signal from the guitar, which would make it almost impossible to play. So this is turned all the way to the right. The next knob is the volume. So this controls how loud the output is going to be. The output is on the back and they're connected to my studio monitors. And finally, there's settings for headphones. So you can plug a headphone in and control the volume in the headphones separately. The next step is to configure Reaper to use your audio interface. You might need drivers for that. If you're running macOS, you're set. macOS has built-in drivers for more or less every audio interface there is. If you're running Windows, you need to get ASIO drivers for your audio interface. So ASIO is a standard for low latency drivers. You usually don't get the ASIO version of the drivers with Windows Update. So you have to go onto the manufacturer's website and download the drivers yourself. but ASIO drivers are an absolute requirement to get low latency audio in Windows. Once you have the drivers present, you go into the preferences, and under audio device, you select your audio device. One of the most important settings here is the block size, also known as the buffer size. If you have a large buffer, that will mean that your computer can handle more incoming information from the audio interface without choking. But it also means that the latency is going to be longer. So what you want is the lowest buffer size that your computer can handle. This setting, 128, is low. This would mean probably that the latency is around 5 or 6 milliseconds. You should be fine with anything up to 512. But again, the lower you can go, the better. If you set the buffer too low, you will notice a lot of clicking and strange noises occurring in your recordings. So you have to try it out on your own system to see what the best setting is. Alright, now that we've got the audio interface set up the way we want it, it's time to try and make our first recording. So we open up Reaper. Here's an empty project. So what you need to do first is add a track. And it's as simple as just double clicking in this empty space. There we go. There's a track. So one good thing about Reaper is that all tracks are the same. There's just one kind of track. In some other DAWs, there's like separate tracks for stereo, mono, MIDI, whatever. In Reaper, they're all the same. What we want to do now is start by arming this track. Arm means it's ready to record, or rather it's ready to receive input from some kind of source. So when we press it, this menu appears where you can select your input. So what we want to do is select input 2, since this is the input that we put the guitar cable into in the audio interface. Once we've done that, we'll have to check that this little speaker icon is either gray or red. If it's not, you won't hear anything from your speakers. So this is the monitoring functionality. This means that Reaper will play back what you record so you can hear it from the speakers. So if this is working now, you should see on the meters that the track is receiving input. One of the most common problems that there's nothing happening, that the meters aren't showing anything. Usually that's because 1, either you haven't armed the track, 2, you've selected the wrong input, like in this case the other input, or like a MIDI thing, or input none even. The third is that the monitoring, the monitor doesn't have to be active for the meters to indicate that there's signals coming in, but you won't hear anything. So with all of these set up the correct way, you should see the meter moving. One other source of problem could be that you haven't turned up the volume, the input volume on your audio interface. So that means there's a hardware thing. You need to turn up the volume knob for the input signal to actually reach your computer. With this setup, we can start recording. We have the guitar, it's put on a track. There are no plugins, no effects. Let's see what happens if we try to record. We press the record button that's way down here to the left. When we're done, we press stop. Now Reaper's gonna ask you, do you want to save this? And sure, we want to save the file. If you press delete, it's going to go away. We have some kind of recording. We can press the play button now to listen to what it sounded like. Well, it sounds pretty much like the direct signal from an electric guitar, which is exactly what it is. The question is, did it sound slightly out of tune? I don't know, but that's one thing we can do. We can put the retune plugin on the track and just see, is the guitar in tune? All this is slightly flat, so we'll tune that a bit. This is a little bit off too. That's fine. Well, good enough. Since we want to play metal, we probably don't want it to sound like clean guitar. So what can we do? Well, obviously we can put a plugin on it. So my favorite guitar plugins right now are from NeuralDSP. I'm going to record some kind of simple rhythm, so we'll go with this one, the Fortin Nameless. It's the Meshuggah simulation. So when we add it, we'll put it in high quality mode. And now, provided that your track is still armed and the monitoring is on, we should hear some kind of other input, or output rather. Cool! Now we have a metal sound. So how about we do a recording with this? And to try and keep us a little bit on tempo, I've set the tempo for this to 170 BPM. And to help us out, we can use the metronome function. So if you right-click the metronome, you can do the settings. So we don't want it to run during playback, but we do want to run it during recording. And we also want a count-in before recording, which means it's going to start the metronome and play for 2 bars, or whatever you set here, so that we can record in tempo. And then we left-click it to activate it. So now if I press record, I'm going to hear the metronome start, and then we can start playing. Now we have 2 repetitions of that rhythm riff. What you want to look out for now is that your signal has an appropriate level. Something like this is nice. We can then raise it a little bit to normalize it like this. But if your signal is looking like this, or even worse, like this, your audio interface input is set too high. So what's going to happen here, it's going to clip. That's going to make the volume too high, and it's going to make the quality of your recorded signal just deteriorate. The other way is, if it's looking like this, it's set way too low, which probably isn't a big deal since it's digitally recorded, but it could still introduce a lot of hiss and unwanted noise. So you basically want your input to look something like this. So let's play this back, see what it sounds like. Well, it's not the cleanest playing, but it's fine for this demonstration. So what you can do now, and what basically every metal guitarist does, is that you can double track your recording. What this means is that you're going to make 2 recordings, try and make them as similar as possible, then put them on 2 different tracks that you pan, hard left and hard right. And this is the reason that I did 2 takes actually in the same recording. We can reuse them. So what you do is, first of all, if you have a plugin that supports it, put it in stereo, then you can keep it on the main track. If you don't, you have to put 1 instance of the plugin on each subtrack. What we do now is add the 2 tracks, one for left and one for right. We put them as sub-tracks to the main one. So this means that each track will send its signal to the parent track that will then interpret it. So the plugin is still on the parent track since it supports stereo. Then we take our recording, we put it, one part of it, the first take, hard left, and then we take the other part and we put that on the other track that goes hard right. What this does is that it gives you a wider stereo sound to your recording, and also it evens out mistakes a bit, because the brain will just mash these two tracks together. So it's going to feel tighter and it's going to give you a huger sound. So let's try what that sounds like. To get a better feel for what this recording sounds like, we're going to add some drums. So I just copied some drums from another project, and let's paste them. Put them next to the guitars. I think the guitars are going to be a bit loud, so we'll turn them down a little bit. And let's see what this, or let's listen to what it sounds like. Cool. So that's pretty much it. I hope that this helps you get on your way to record metal guitars in Reaper. And if you have any questions or feedback, just leave them in the comments. And please subscribe. See you next time.